Greetings, old friends. Today, let's review this Habaki katana of the ocean scene, sent to me by Henry K. at Romance of Net. And I was informed that the Habaki katana here is one of their latest offerings, sporting their entire in-house design that has a strong ocean motif. First impression is that I have been very impressed by the coherent motif featured in the aesthetic elements of the entire sword, but also the handling is no slouch. Based on my estimation of the characteristics of this sword, it will perform rather well in test cutting. Nikki and I will do some test cutting with this sword. As you know, Nikki has reviewed two swords at this point, and the proportion of this katana happens to be her favorite to handle. We will take a close look at the hilt fitting of the sword, which features many crustacea on both the tsuba and the fuchi kashira, and you will see all the elements are quite unique. On the ornamental menuki, the tsuba, there are two lobsters, which is the reason we have prepared a feast of lobsters today, and we will introduce the sword during the course of this meal. Shall we begin? So are there numerous crustacea on the hilt fittings. As suggested, there's a strong motif behind the design of the sword, namely the lobsters on the pair of menuki, the ornamental pins on the grip of the katana. Also, we see two shrimps on the tsuba hand guard. The tsuba has the sculpted geometries of these shrimps. Now, ebi in Japanese just means sea elders because of the crooked shape of the shrimps. They resemble elder people, and obviously they symbolize longevity, resilience, wisdom, all that can be associated with elders. And lobster symbolize strength and protection due to their protective armor. And you see lobsters often featured on samurai armor, particularly the capital, the helmet. Now, I have seen shrimps featured on antique Japanese tsuba, the handguard for katanas, and most of the time they are engraved onto the surface of the tsuba. Occasionally, you see sculpted ones with very prominent geometries and popping out three-dimensional shapes. And you will see some perforated ones in between to highlight the shapes, the body of the shrimp. And this very tsuba is indeed perforated in several places to bring out the numerous shrimp legs and antennae. And you see here, this tsuba has two surface design on both sides, and the geometries wrap around. The side of the tsuba is a continuation of the geometries, the back shells of the shrimps. So it shows the attention to detail when it comes down to design and romance of men. And this feature is often neglected on many modern reproduction katanas. You know, the lateral dimension of tsuba is often ignored, just a flat surface, and you can see that no piece of fade on this specific katana has been left unadorned. If you look at the Habaki, it's a typical brass Habaki, but I can appreciate on the lateral facets there is an attempt to emulate the two-piece traditionally made Habaki. And you also see a model or a symbol engraved onto the surface at base of the Habaki that has a texture emulating the ocean's waves. So this is a very fitting image as we're sitting here processing this lobster in front of the ocean. And we can see the Habaki is very well fitted. There's no ledges sticking out either from the blade to the transition of the Habaki or on the edge side. There's no gap left in between. And also, this is one thing that's often not done right on production sword. is the seppa, the washer of this piece, of the brass piece, fits the central pedestal of the tsuba very well. So no part of it is sticking out. You wouldn't be able to accidentally jam your finger or thumb into the opening and break a nail. We see that a shrimp is featured on the fuchi, the collar of this brass piece. Another shrimp is carved onto the base of the pommel, which is called a kashira, the sword. And the transition to tsuba is very well done. There are some ledges on the other katana sent to me by Romance of Men, and I think they address this issue quite well. They increase the thickness of the ito wrapping when the tsuka meets the fuchi. So even though there is a thickness difference, they do make it so that there's no ledge and you wouldn't be able to catch your fingernail on the ledge. So there's no hot spot in terms of handling, very ergonomic. Although I would prefer them to lessen the thickness of the fuchi slightly to fit the geometry of this tsuka. You can see the tsuka indeed has a very subtle hourglass. So in the center it's less wide, here is wider. Of course you can increase the degree of hourglass shape on the tsuka so it will meet the fuchi without any ledge or gap. And you can see here on the part where it meets the kashira is done rather well. Also, ito wrapping is done with hichigami, so essentially small paper triangles placed under the cotton or silk wrapping to shape the diamonds more evenly. You can see the diamonds here are very evenly done. They're all very equal in size and shape. The stingray skin wrapping around the wooden core is done with panel, so there's no hard edges sticking out. So the entire hilt is very well done, very well executed by professionals. And we can see indeed Romance of Men have very competent craftsmen and smiths working for them. You can see the menuki pin. It's a very prominent lobster here. So lobsters have very rounded shells, and this is reflected on the design of this piece. Also, I can appreciate that many of the menukis have a design just tend to catch onto your hand, your skin, your fingernails, and this isn't the case with this lobster menuki because it's quite rounded, and even though it sticks out a little bit, but there's no discomfort caused by it. Now we look at the blade here. It's a differentially hardened blade of T10-2 steel. It's clearly clay tempered, and there's a very prominent hamon, a very unique pattern. Clay tempering cover the backward spine of the blade, so it cools down slower than the edge, resulting in a softer spine, tends to bend but not break, but the harder edge will have greater edge retention. You can see here the pattern of the hamon on this one is close to that of choji pattern, antique Nihonto. But instead of the very lively flame pattern, this is more like a seawave pattern. So I think it blends in quite well with the overall ocean motif. It has a better than average degree of distal tapering, meaning the blade thickness thins down gradually from the base to the tip, but also there's a degree of profile taper, meaning that the width of the blade also tapers. So this results in quite a lively blade, definitely a faster sword than the average modern reproduction katanas. And you can see there's no bulky or fuller on the back of the blade. So this is one solid piece, and it's also of Shinogi Juzukuri geometry. So there's no fancy, munkuri, very rare geometries on this one. Just a very standard, most stereotypical katana geometry. But I do like the geometric yokote, which is the hard edge when the blade starts to thin down and transitions to a pointy tip. Towards the tip, we can feel there's a clear ledge over here. And this is not just an artifact of different directions of polishing, like on many modern reproduction swords. This is indeed a geometric transition. If you look at the thickness of the blade here and the coating, you see a clear change of direction of tapering of thickness. So this is done very well. Usually this feature is only found on more premium offerings by competent makers. So I'm very pleased with this being incorporated onto the blade of this katana. Overall, you can see that this is a very well designed and executed piece by Romance of Man. They have been a rather budget conscious katana maker. Most of their offerings so far has been rather affordable, and this is one of their premium offerings. And I thank Hurricane for sending this review sample to me, a very generous offer, along with the other mono tempered hardened blade katana with unko geometry, which is more of a beginner friendly sword for cutting practices. And as in this one, it's a very competitive offer for the asking price. It has a number of good features and a very strong and coherent motif throughout the sword. Very well executed, doesn't share any design, with other swords. One problem with Russian katana is that the casting mode for the kashira's components are shared with across different models and also shared among different makers. So obviously having a unique dedicated mode to cast for the hilt fittings is a boon and definitely a feature for this sword. And we shall see about its performance during the test cutting, which I think will perform rather well. Based on blade geometry, there's pretty much no miku, or the muscle of the edge bevel. It's a very flat ground V-wedge. So this will do rather well. And also the edge sharpness is quite adequate for test cutting. So let's take a look at the test cutting we have done. This sword does pretty well. Handles like a average katana, but it's a little bit lighter, a little bit faster. Point is quite nimble and precise. I felt that when I did all the cutting and thrusting, I could get the point, the tip where I wanted to be, and all the slices, can land on the target where I want it to be, where my eyes are staring at. And yeah, in general, it might not be the most durable sword, being differentially hardened. It's true steel, but the edge is quite hard, and you can see on the steel. Not sure whether you're aware of the property of scratch resistance. You see, after a cutting section, if you don't spot any scratch marks, it means that the steel is relatively hard and the edge is pretty much in the exact same state before I started cutting. So yeah, I would expect this blade to be rather rigid. Yeah, you can see it has less flex than the model tempered spring steel on the Lobster Katana. So the spine is relatively soft, much more so than the spine with this hamon pattern. And you can also see the hamon pattern covers quite a broad, a breast, a large portion of the blade. So there's a good chunk of the blade has a hard edge. It's only the bottom half of the blade that's softer. So rather stain resistant and scratch resistant, can hold an edge. So it's a pretty good choice of steel. It's a compromise between the cost effectiveness, and the property, physical property. So it's well heat treated, and you can see after cutting, perfectly straight, no warping and bending, and neither should have been any, because these are relatively lightweight targets, relatively soft. There's nothing I didn't run through any hard plastic parts. So for the most part, its value lies in the aesthetic department. And yeah, does pretty well. Everything you can hope for. And relatively pleasant experience to handle. The blade has a decent amount of distal taper and the profile taper, resulting in a relatively lively feeling sword. And you can see there's not a lot of niku on the bevel, so making it below average in terms of weight. And this is mirrored by a distal taper, a gradually thinning scabbard thickness on the saya. This is rarely seen on production katanas, so excellent attention to detail there. You can also see the shitodome is pretty well affixed, not glued in any way, but just being in there solidly. And kojiri seem to be made of horn, and they are well executed, very flush. And the scabbard has a hand painted pattern. I think this is to emulate lobster's color when cooked. One thing noteworthy about the hamon on this blade is that the milky part of the polish is on the section near the spine, whereas the edge is highly polished. This is the opposite of what traditional katanas have on their hamon. Usually the edge has a frosty, milky finish rather than the higher grit polish. So keep that in mind. However, the hamon still looks gorgeous despite of this. Can I recommend the Romance of Man Epic Katana? Well, I can definitely give my unequivocal recommendation to this very feature-rich offering. For what you pay, you get a katana with a relatively lively and pleasant handling characteristics, and a very prominent and lively hamon pattern that's not commonly seen. And you get a set of fittings that's one-off for this particular model. It doesn't share the casting mold with anyone else, so has very crisp lines and definitions, and remains truly unique to this model. It also pays extensive homage to the traditional depictions of marine life creatures in the Japanese culture. So aesthetically, it's a very pleasing sword as well. You get certain features that are not commonly associated with swords of this price range, such as the geometric yokote and saya with horn parts, also distally tapered in thickness. So on a $300 sword, you might be able to get a subset of these features if you do your homework, of course. But for all of them, you usually have to pay $600 to $800, if not more. And Romance of Man actually offers free shipping around the world. And I actually went to their website to try to place an order and see whether they do honor this offer, because they send these for free. And to my surprise, it actually costs $0 to ship to Canada. And shipping a sword that usually costs around $50, so you can slash $50 off the $350 offer. So this is really a sword that costs around $300, should we say, which is an incredible value for what it offers. And I will be relatively pleased with all of these features on a $600 or $800 sword. But there you go, you get all of these on a $300 offer. When Romance of Man contacted me to offer some review samples 3 years ago, the mail was filtered out, so I didn't see that. But I did see lots of reviews of their swords by other reviewers, such as Alien 2, Joe Steele. Initially, I wasn't very impressed by what they had to offer, but over time, I clearly see their drastic improvement, especially on their recent offerings, such as the Lobster Katana and this new Habaki Katana. So you have to give them credit for actively improving rapidly over time. If you're interested in this model, you can check out the link in the description below. And if you enjoy this review, find any value or entertainment, please like and subscribe.